To you, Chair. We should be live on YouTube.
Excellent, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. We like to call the Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting to order for August 28th at 1 p.m. We'll start with an acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the Township of Cabin-Monaghan is located on the Treaty 20 Mississauga territory in the traditional territory of the Michifali and Anishinaabe. We offer our gratitude to First Nations for their care and teachings about these lands, and may we honor those teachings. All right, so first thing I want to do is approval of the agenda. We all got a copy of it prior to the meeting today. So I'll just ask for a motion to approve the agenda as it is presented. So get a mover.
Sure.
And seconder, Lucy. And all in favor? Carries. Does anybody have a disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature for the meeting today? Anything to declare? Seeing none, perfect. There is no closed session for this meeting. Minutes of the meeting held January 23rd. Again, you all got a copy of it to review previously. So I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes as presented for the meeting we held on July 23rd, 2025. You Lucy, the mover, seconder. I'm sorry, thank you. All in favor? Carries. Perfect. So the general business for today, one of the tasks that we will be asked to perform as a committee is the review of site plans. So we have a site plan review process 101 training with Karen Ellis, the Director of Planning, and Matt Wilkinson, the planner. Karen, now turn the review.
Thank you very much, Karen. So today is intended to be a training session for you, just to help you understand what you're going to be looking at in your roles as members of the Accessibility Advisory Committee. So this is intended to be very kind of basic, get you some basic knowledge and answer any questions you have. So if you have questions as we go along, please feel free to interrupt, and we're happy to do our best to provide you with an answer or make a commitment to come back with that information at a later date. So what we're planning to do today is just to give you an indication of what is site plan control, what is a site plan and why are they required. We're going to give you a little outline of Cabin-Monaghan Township's policies and bylaws that we consider when we're reviewing the site plan. We're going to look at when our site plan application is required, what your the review process is, what your role in that process is, and then lastly, how to read a site plan. Okay. So site plan control is a planning tool that municipalities can choose to use. The regulations or the authorization to use site plan approval is found in the Planning Act, section 41. It is an optional tool. If you want to use the tool, you have to have policies in your official plan that outline a site plan control area. So right now, in respect of the Cabin-Monaghan official plan, our site plan control policies are found in section 8.7 of the plan. With that official plan policy, we have designated all of the township of Cabin-Monaghan as a site plan control area. So that means that site plan approval, policies and regulations apply throughout the township. So a site plan is generally a drawing or a set of drawings that illustrate a development proposal on a specific parcel of land. It can include things like the location, the massing, and the conceptual design of a building or buildings or structures. It can be the location and type of lighting and landscaping, vehicular access points, pedestrian access points, and movement areas, walkways, parking and loading facilities, the surfacing of those areas, the location and design of walkways and walkway ramps, grading, drainage, and connections to municipal and private services like well and septic or piped water and sewer services. It can include things like waste and recycling containers, signage, lighting, the grade and elevation of the land, and the type and location of storm surface and wastewater disposal facilities. So all of those things are generally found on site plans. Not everything is applicable in every single situation, but that's a very general list of what we expect to see on a plan. We also, in addition to those kind of structural things, we look at natural features and hazardous areas like floodplains. We look at areas of outside storage and those properties that permit that type of use. And exterior design matters in terms of what is the building gonna look like, if it's appropriate for us to look at that. Site plans ensure that the development that we see in our community meets the municipal standards for appearance, function, and integration into the community. The regulations that apply or the standards are quite often found in the township site plan approval bylaw and our zoning bylaw. As part of the site plan approval process, there are agreements that go with the site plan that quite often are entered into between the applicant and the township. They get registered on title, often, not always, but often. And sometimes there's financial security that is taken by the township to ensure that the applicant actually builds what is on the approved plan. That security is generally related to things that are community assets or things that affect community infrastructure. Once the plan, the construction activities have finished, we do an inspection and they apply for a release of their security, and then we give it back. I don't think I've ever in my career so far had to actually spend somebody's security to finish a project. But that option is out there, but that's not something we enter into lightly.
So on that note, if somebody applies for, and I don't know who gets to decide whether you need a site plan or not. And I don't know who decides what all items out of all those possibilities have to be included with a particular site plan. But at the end of the day, in your security deposit that you take, make sure things are done properly. What happens when it doesn't conform, but it is finished, built and wanting to be used? And the security deposit won't cover the cost of making it right, for the lack of a better expression. Like, how's all that play in?
So to answer your first question, we decide,
Staff,
so it's in our official plan dictates what site plan approval applies to, and it provides a list of exceptions. So right now, Cabamonigan Township site plan requirements apply to commercial, industrial, institutional, and some multi-residential land uses. Agricultural buildings are generally exempted unless they're gonna be used for a non-farm diversified use sort of thing with a public component. Like if you were to have a wedding barn or, you know, a restaurant or something like that, site plan approval would apply. But if you're just building a barn or a silo or something like that, it doesn't apply. Similarly, for a single detached dwelling, doesn't apply. As soon as you get into an apartment block, it can apply, yes. With the security, so with site plans, most of the activity generally occurs on private property. There's obviously entrance features, there may be stormwater management features that will be subject to security. So the security is based on the anticipated construction amount for those features and that infrastructure. If they don't build to the required specs, then, as I said, we could use that security to fix it. But we haven't not, in my experience, run into that problem yet. It is a discussion point because it is, as with many things in the municipal world today, enforcement is
Max.
challenging. Well, I'm not sure it's challenging, even if you know, I think that's a discussion for another time, but it is. We continue to work with applicants and property owners to bring them into compliance, and we try to be flexible and we try to outline what the requirements are at the front end of the process when we do pre-consultation prior to them filing an application, so they know what the expectations are. And then we work with our partners in terms of their professional consulting staff, like engineers. We have peers at the Conservation Authority, Ministry of Transportation, etc., who also work with us to make sure that site plans are done correctly and are built in accordance with the approved plans. Keep myself organized here. So in addition to official plan policies, we also have a site plan control area bylaw. The most recent edition of that was passed in 2023. That bylaw provides definitions and requirements for site plan approval submission. So that's where you get the list of items in addition to the policies in the official plan. There's a definition of development in that bylaw that dictates to us when site plan approval can be applied as well. The zoning bylaw, I'm sure you're probably aware that we also have a township-wide comprehensive zoning bylaw. So every property is zoned in a particular zone category. There are regulations that go with that zone category in terms of minimum lot area, minimum lot frontage, setbacks, what the permitted uses are, what the maximum height is, lot coverage, landscaping, etc. Those are the regulations we use to evaluate a site plan, to check whether they meet the setbacks, whether the use is permitted, whether they have the right number of parking spaces, whether the parking spaces meet the required size, that type of thing. So the bylaw is quite specific. It also contains many definitions that provide guidance to staff in terms of our review of these applications. So site plan approval, as we've indicated, is generally required for all commercial, industrial, and institutional projects. Multi-residential and agricultural development can be subject to site plan approval under certain circumstances. The site has to be properly zoned to permit the use for us to be able to approve a site plan. Sometimes site plan applications are processed at the same time as a zoning bylaw amendment application, and they run concurrently. With a zoning bylaw amendment application, there is a public process in that we are required to have a public meeting before council and we circulate to neighbors. With site plan approval, there is no public requirement. So site plans don't generally get circulated to neighbors. There is no public notification. And at this point in time, staff have delegated authority to approve site plans. So site plans don't go to council. That's provided that we can make a recommendation to the approval person that the application meets all of our standard requirements.
On that note, is that information confidential, or are those site plans, if somebody wanted to in the community, can they ask to see it, even though it's not prescribed to be sent out? If somebody wanted to, can they ask for it? Is it accessible to neighbors or whatever?
Are you asking before approval process or after the approval is finished?
Well, it's kind of worrisome till beforehand. After it's a done deal, it doesn't matter, right? But I'm just wondering, is it allowed to be accessed by somebody if they request it, or is it deemed as confidential thing?
I would say it's available to the public unless the people in the clerk's department indicate differently.
I wouldn't want to comment on the specifics.
Mark, I don't have a statement on that.
Yeah. I think there's generally, with the application, there is the plan itself and then there is supporting documentation. And it's, just because there's not a public process, it's still a live planning application. So I think if someone wanted to see it, we would make that available. Okay, so with the site plan approval submissions, as I said, we require plans prepared by a qualified individual. So quite often that is a professional engineer, professional architect, landscape architect. Sometimes they require some environmental professionals to do natural heritage evaluations, environmental impact studies. Sometimes there's servicing experts required. So we do require a plan submitted. Obviously, we want to see a plan that shows the property boundaries, where the property is located, kind of in the world, so to speak. We want to see where the buildings and structures are on the plan, where the parking, loading, lighting, landscaping, waste management, all of those things, trees, lights, fences, all of that.
Survey stakes,
Property boundaries.
Property boundaries.
that'd be part of the requirement.
Yeah. So some of the things we also look at are stormwater management. So Matt will talk about lot grading and drainage after we get into the review of the site plans. We ask people to show any easements that are subject to the property. So sometimes there's hydro or telephone easements that need to be respected. We look at underground servicing in terms of utilities, hydro, Nexicom, Val, piped water and sewer services. We look at where the well, where the septic is, if it's on private services, any signage. That's all information that's required to be shown on the. So you have a role in, as the committee, in reviewing the plans. And so we will bring the plans to you and you will look at them in terms of the prevention and elimination of barriers faced by persons with disabilities. The identification, prevention, and removal of barriers to the participation of persons with disabilities in civic life. So we can determine, and we will determine, that they require, based on the use and the size of the building, that they require 4 accessible parking spaces. We'll make sure they're the right size and that they have the right accommodations for the markings and that accessible to the parking space. What we would like you to tell us simplistically is, are those parking spaces in the right spot? You know, things like that.
One quick question, when we are asked to do a site plan review at a meeting, will either of you be able to be in attendance or available for questions, or if we need them?
I believe that's the intention of,
Is it attendance?
yes.
Yes.
Through
Actually,
you to you, Chair, each application that comes forward, then whether it is a public works component of it or it's planning component of it, that director will bring that to the committee.
perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So if there's no more questions, maybe we'll, okay.
On that note there, at what step in the site plan process would we be involved at that level? Like, I'm thinking it would have to be fairly preliminary, but I'm just curious. When the committee would it be brought to them.
We haven't really,
We've had multiple discussions about that.
Yeah, so right now, as far as I understand, we're supposed to have a minimum of 4 per calendar year meetings,
Oh, meetings.
but they would be moved around in accordance to what site plans are coming into the township.
As the plans come in through you, Chair Councilor Burns, as the plans come in, we would call the meeting in that time. And just to answer your first part of your question, staff will make sure that, as Karen had said, the proper parking spots are there and all of that is there. Once they've felt that it's a complete, not necessarily deemed complete, but complete in a way that we want to present it to you, that's when we'll bring it to the committee. It will be in a time frame that your comments will be considered, but we're not. Sometimes it takes a couple of iterations to get a site plan at a spot that's ready to present to you, so we want to make sure your time is used efficiently, so we'll make sure that that plan's in a position that we can present it to you. Does that answer?
yeah, so you will have valuable input, but as Cindy said, we don't wanna bring
This
in.
is a learning process, so I'm asking
Yeah,
questions.
yeah,
For all of us,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, exactly, you know, based on that, so we'll just move into. A site plan, just, so is anybody looked at site plans or have any idea what you're looking at or? Cause I can gauge the detail of what we're going to based on your experience. Okay. So this is an approved site plan, now true confessions, so this plan has not been constructed. So they went through the planning process, the site plan got approved, and Enbridge decided to this date not to construct this project.
But it's still on the books
It's still in the books,
and they
Yeah.
own the property.
and they own the property, yes. So you'll see on the site plan, so we, in the planning world, look at certain things right off the bat. So for going way back to my high school geography days, there's 5 things I always look at. North is usually to the top of the page. We get a title. We get a plot date, and then there's revision dates on the legend, and you can see there's more legend information here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and unfortunately, this is covering, but you can see, so there's, we get a location, so this is Highway 7, and then this is Morton Line under here. So this property is at the northwest corner of
That's
Morton Line, yes, yes. So this site plan, normally you would have property boundaries, which you can see here. Normally you would see the entire property, but because this property is bigger and they are only developing a portion of the property, they've concentrated on the area of the property that is to be developed. This is the building that they proposed. Parking spaces, and you can see these are accessible spaces by the fact that they have these accessible. You're just making me look bad at the pointer, aren't you?
Sorry. Now you're keeping up pretty well.
So, and you can see that, it's a little hard to see, I'm sorry, but there's light standards shown here on the parking lot. Sign over here, stormwater management facility. The septic area is in here. Now, something else you should be aware of is that when you're on private services like piped water and sewer, if you have a development of a certain size, you will require on-site water for firefighting purposes. So in this plan, there's also tanks for, like, underground tanks to store water in case there's a fire.
And the threshold for that is what now?
That's under the building code, so Bill and Kyle work out that map. And they work with the applicant to determine how much water is required and where it can go on site and how the water can be accommodated. In this particular case, there's tanks underground, but there's other developments where the on-site water is provided through the stormwater management facility. So that's always a discussion point at the front end of the process. So in this particular case, because it's Enbridge, they have a lot of outside storage needs and parking. So you can see quite a large area of the site has been deemed for that storage and parking area. So you can see they've got pipe storage there. I can't even say that word, cathodic storage, hazardous materials. So they've identified all that. And they've identified fencing around that, and they've identified gates. So that's basically what a site plan looks at. Now, there's grading and drainage that goes with this, and Matt's gonna speak to that. So this is a rural example of a true industrial style development. This is not like overly public facing, but obviously with the number of parking spaces they have and the number of accessible parking spaces, there is some public accessibility to the building. So you would, in this type of situation, you would be looking for your input on a site plan such as this. Okay, do you have any questions?
Everything inside the building is out of our purview,
Correct. That would be under building code.
right? And we're not looking at enhancing any of that or making recommendations to that at all.
We can't change the building code because it's Ontario code.
I realize, but at some point in time, there's supposed to be input into that mechanism to come up with new standards, new codes, new this.
I, through you, Chair, to Councilor Byrne, I don't know about that, so I can't
All right,
comment.
that's fine.
So in this particular case, also, you can see that there's wetlands up here, so that there was environmental impact study done on this project to identify what the developable lands are, and could they actually fit this development on the property, and they managed to fit it on. We didn't provide the elevation drawings to go with this submission, but we do have them, so we would have an idea of what the building would look like once constructed. It showed where the windows are, the type of surface on the outside, you know, any signage attached to the building, any outside lighting. And the last point I would ask is about the lighting, or tell you about the lighting, is we have a requirement that it be dark sky compliant. What that means is the lighting should be focused down, not up, so that the lighting will be focused in the parking lot, on the entrance to the building, etc., and not polluting the dark sky.
No, that's to that point, the store down in Millbrook that used to be the Vanity Mart has a big illuminated billboard on the back of it. That's dark sky compliant.
Are you talking about a TV screen?
I guess you'd call it. That's some kind of great big LED display that's like 20 feet by.
So that was not in. That was not subject to site plan approval. There was no planning approval, so planning staff have nothing to do with that.
Okay, it just.
Yes, so the dark sky compliant requirement for lighting is we would like everyone to do that, but we do enforce that as part of a planning approval. So with site plan approval, that's a requirement. You will see details on the lighting plan that indicate it's dark sky compliant.
So now if this case scenario goes ahead and everything gets approved and they complete it as dialed in, and then years down the road, they make changes, does it come back to anything about accessibility? Like if they change the format or they added something, does that reinitiate a new site plan, or how's that work under the building code?
So it's under the site plan approval process. So you can do an amendment to a site plan and that requirement for a formal amendment to the site plan is flexible. So if they, let's say this was Enbridge and they wanted to change it to another office type use, that's not a site plan amendment because nothing is physically changing. If they came back and said, okay, we need less outside storage and we want to put a big building addition on here, that would come back, yes.
As a new site plan.
Yes, and we would, through pre-consultation process, outline what technical reports are required to justify that change. Okay, do you wanna,
I just wanted to reiterate a point that he was saying, so we are just doing the outside. We have no say on accessibility to get in that building or around that building at all.
inside, I believe it's Ontario Building Code. And that's the building department's purview to do that.
Which there are requirements through you, Chair. There are requirements that do require an AODA compliance, and so Kyle would make sure that those components were taken. Municipal buildings and different renovations like that, those comments would come to the committee for consideration, depending on what the program was. The other component of this would be like the exterior pathway that would lead from the parking lot to the entrance. That would be something you could provide comment on, where the accessible button fall on the building. If they were not going to have one and it was a handle, you could provide recommendations on where the handle would go. But once you got into the building, there would not be that, it would fall under Kyle and the building code to make sure that.
Okay.
Kind of not relevant, but now would that be the minimum distance from the roadway for that entrance to that site plan? Is that a restriction that you have put on?
So in this particular case, good question, in this particular case, because this is Highway 7 under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Transportation, they have their own set of criteria and requirements. So they would dictate to a certain extent the distance between this entrance and that intersection.
Mhm.
So this was placed to meet those Ministry of Transportation. It also worked well for the development of the site in terms of, we did request that they put the building or have a look at having the building facing the street and the intersection, just because it tends to look a little bit nicer to have a building front facing at the closest part to the street and having your parking area behind. So. But yes, so there are requirements that do step in above the township requirements. So we are a creature of the province. So if MTO says ye shall have, 100 meters, ye shall have 100 meters. Okay.
The next slide. So I'm gonna quickly touch on the lot grading and drainage part. So as part of all site plans, one major requirement is managing your stormwater on site. So this ensures that the water that falls on your site stays on your site and doesn't impact your neighbors. It also controls in case of a 100-year storm. These need to be sized. This is the storm pond here. These need to be sized so that it holds the water and then dissipates over time so that you don't impact downstream or other natural features. So if you folks are looking at this, what I generally look at is these, you can zoom in, Mark. So in here we have X's and pluses. So the X's are the existing, so a topographical survey was shot before. So this is just bare ground as it sits today. So these are the elevation numbers. And these with the pluses are what they're proposing to fill or grade the site to. So in here we have 196.16 and here 196.2. So they're gonna be about 40 centimeters. So not a huge deal compared to a lot of sites where we can see 2-3 meters of fill. These numbers in here, they'll point out your grade. So 1.5% grade, 1.3% grade. So it's getting a little steeper as it comes in here. And so in here, these arrows denote the flow pathways of water. So let's say water lands on your parking lot, it's going to then travel down here until we get to this catch basin. It's going to come across here to get to the catch basin and then flow into, in this particular development, they chose to do a dry pond. So a dry pond, you've seen wet ponds around where the water is sitting. In these, the water fills in and then dissipates down. So it's a little bit different from what you see in, say, your average subdivision. And that's usually depends on the groundwater conditions that are around, and if there's an outsource, they don't have an outsource here, it's just wetlands around, so there's no conveyance to get that water away from the site, so in this case, they've chosen infiltration. We zoom back over to the building. So as Karen mentioned, one of the major things we look at is how the site functions. So when you're coming in, you know, is this gonna be a steep grade to come in off the street? This is, you know, you're gonna be driving in, so it's not one of those public facing, not as public facing as you would find. But, you know, what's the grade of the sidewalk? What's the grade of the driveway? What's the grade coming in? And then how is there enough space in between all this? As Karen said, we have, the zoning bylaw gives us numbers that say, how wide is your drivable aisle? How big is your parking spaces? Are your parking spaces, how big are your accessible parking spaces? And as, Cindy mentioned, I was looking at how big is this walkway in between here and here? And in this case, we don't see it, it's probably in the elevations and on another drawing, but it's not as definitive, so that would be a good comment to say, how wide is that that walkway? Here you have your grass swale. So in here, another feature of drainage. So we see across here, so swale is basically, you know, your V cut into the grass where the water is going to collect and it flows. In this case, it's flowing this way and up till here. And it's just a way to capture your water on site. But all of this, so with most engineering, is they like to scrape it clean and then put the engineer fill back in so that it's everything that they want it to be, starting from a clean slate. But that's basically my grading change.
So I was kind of puzzled by no outgoing, because Cabin Creek is just like 500 yards to the south, and all that land kind of drains through what,
It's down here.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so there's a road in between,
yes,
there's wetland to the north,
Yes.
wetland to the south.
but there must be a natural flow of water either at the highway edge. You just puzzled me when you said there was no outgoing
There's no
water.
natural conveyance, so when I say a natural conveyance, I'm saying an actual creek on site that you
Okay.
would direct the water to, and then it would convey not across public or not across private property. So you can't have a swale cut or pipe going through someone else's yard. The whole point is to keep the water and your development on your property.
Yeah, and as part of that process, so in terms of the engineering, you get pre-development flows and post-development flows. That's all part of the technical documents that informs the site plan.
I'm guessing there's a whole bunch of rules on the dry pond for its composition and what's depth and size is already mentioned, but the actual gradient underneath it, and I'm guessing that roads have to be to a certain degree of aggregate that would allow drainage properly. That's all under the site plan.
The roads don't typically allow for drainage, they would, because these are all asphalt.
Yes,
So
but the
because
base,
once
you need a
they're,
base or else you're not
oh
gonna
yeah,
keep the
yeah,
asphalt.
Public Works looks at how the roads and they're all built to a standard, they don't just allow sand.
Do you wanna flip to the next one, Mark, and we'll talk about a more urban, straightforward. Oh, thanks. So this particular application is fairly straightforward in that this proposal involved the conversion of an existing dwelling unit to a business, so a chiropractor's establishment. So the zoning in downtown Millbrook did permit the use, and so we required a site plan to show how it would change in function from a house with a typical residential driveway to a commercial establishment with parking on site that met the zoning bylaw requirements, proper control of the signage, what it's gonna look like. We dealt with some land use compatibility between a parking lot and neighboring residential uses that are still there. So you'll see, so this is King Street. And this property is located just west of Hay Street on the south side. This is Cabin Chiropractic, in case that you can relate to that on the ground. So this is the existing house. So obviously the existing house was there to stay. There was an existing driveway that they were gonna use, but they were gonna widen the driveway a little bit there. You can see proposed asphalt. This is new, so this is a parking area, so they had to provide a certain number of parking spaces based on the use. those parking spaces are required to be a minimum of 3 meters wide by 6 meters long. And then for an accessible parking space, you can see it's 3.6 meters wide, give you a little extra width to allow accommodation to the vehicles. Their stormwater management facility is located at the south end of the property. In this case, there is a creek at the back. There was some landscaping requirements too, in that they were gonna add some trees, so they had to take down a couple of trees to accommodate a widened driveway, and then they were gonna replace them with some coniferous trees. They also, along this side, proposed a wood fence to provide some buffer between the residential use on this side of the property. There is a sign, a wooden sign outside, and there is some lighting on the building itself. So in this particular case, so this parking lot is new. The accessible parking space is here. There's an existing walkway that they use, and the door from this level is right there. In this particular case, they're connected to piped water and sewer, so it was already a connection, and we didn't need to see that on the plan because the use didn't change that service requirements. In this particular case, again, they don't have a lot of waste in terms of garbage or recyclable materials. They were dealing with that inside the building. If it was outside the building, we would be looking at a space somewhere around here to store that kind of thing, and we would be looking at an enclosure to block it from public view. At the same time, we'd have to make sure that it was easily enough accessible, so when the recycling truck or the garbage truck came, or whoever coming to clean it out, can easily maneuver, access that enclosure, get rid of the stuff and drive away without adversely affecting any pedestrians or other vehicular traffic. So this is a fairly straightforward one. You can see there's details about the sign that would be put there for the accessible parking space, a yield to oncoming traffic because the driveway width is a little bit tighter in terms of two-way traffic. This is to the asphalt, where before it was grass. Did you want to comment about the drainage or the?
I was just gonna bring up, so this site, they did not, their original, when they said they were completed, they did not build to the site specs. So when we went out to inspect it and we did not see the vegetated strip, we did not see the wood fence. That's the second iteration of the storm pond, so they didn't build it to spec. So we held on to the securities and told them to fix it. And we would come back after they got that signed off by their engineer. So they did end up fixing it so that it was working in accordance with their own site plan.
So to the left, the boundary for that entity is whatever the stream is at the moment. So the kind of checkered line outlines their property boundary, but there's nothing to the, I would say, to the east.
Similar to the previous one where they didn't show the entire site,
Yes,
we're looking at the developable envelope and what's going on. So we as a site plan review, we're not looking past the proposed turf reinforcement mats. So if there's anything past that, then they're out of compliance.
And in this case, north is that way.
yeah.
So that, sometimes there's a complicated reason because of the configuration of the
yeah.
property. But you can see at the bottom too, Mark, in inset D, there's you can see the sign right there. So we get a kind of a mock-up of what the sign will look like. We get details about, is it illuminated? Is it just a wood sign? We ask, is it gonna be a freestanding sign on the lawn? Is it gonna be attached to the house or the building? So everything, I don't want to say everything is controlled because I don't want to leave you the impression that we're micromanaging everybody's development. That's not what we're doing. We provide guidance and they provide the information and then we'll review it. So, as I say, with signage, as long as it's, respective of the community ambiance, we don't really weigh in on, oh, you shouldn't do that, or you should do this. We try to encourage people to have signage and lighting that fits with the community that they're located in, so. We do stick to the rules in terms of number of size of parking spaces, aisle widths, loading spaces, setbacks in terms of where the building sits relative to the property line, landscaping requirements, etc.
So would there have been a site plan for the Tinney's old house on the main street across from the Legion way back in the day before it got renovated, or? Is that,
No, not to the
Okay.
best of my knowledge.
okay,
But
cause
should that site be redeveloped
It'll need
into
one.
into a commercial enterprise, the expectation is that there would be a site plan on it.
But if it stayed as a single residential dwelling, then it wouldn't.
sorry,
If it stayed as a single residential dwelling,
but it hasn't.
no,
Oh,
but if it did,
if it went back to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
so as previous, it was a house, so
yes,
it wouldn't have required site plan for being, because it's a house.
no, but there was a process there where it was being modified and anticipation. I just wondered.
Yeah, I'm not sure we ever had a clear indication of what the use was gonna be, so there was no
fair
site
enough.
plan approval.
Required.
Or started at that point in time. I think our expectation is that should that property be redeveloped, it would be a commercial oriented development.
Great. Great, thank you very much. Appreciate it. It's been incredibly helpful for us. Thank you. So now I'd like to ask for a motion to receive the site plan review process 101 from Karen Ellis, Director of Planning, Matt Wilkinson, the planner for information. We have a mover in a second. Looks like Lucy, you did. All in favor? Excellent, that carries. And that pretty much wraps us up for today. We'll now ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Before we did that,
Oh, sorry, yeah,
I noticed that in the agenda, like there's no step in between for motions or any of that stuff. Is that not needed at this committee level?
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Byrne, I'm misunderstanding your question.
Okay,
A
so,
motion for what, Councillor Byrne?
well, if we had anything else to address at a particular meeting moving forward, would there be a period of time to have that addressed before we adjourn?
Like an extra item added to an agenda that's not pre on the agenda?
Yes.
No, we don't do that, Councillor Byrne. We could work, if there's something we wanted to talk about at the meeting, we could talk with the chair to see if that would be something we would add to the agenda. Like for the upcoming meetings.
Right. So for me, like this committee is right in its infancy.
Mhm.
So I thought that might be appropriate to talk about. Is it possible to delete line 2, the land acknowledgement? We're here for the accessibility of everybody, not itemized out to one specific group being. I just wonder if it's appropriate that it's there, or is it more appropriate that it's not there?
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Byrne, it's appropriate that it's there. The land acknowledgement is something we do for all of our advisory committees and our council meetings. It's a standard practice in township.
Bylaw or just a policy?
It's a policy, it's a practice that we do. We do land acknowledgement for all of our council meetings and all of our advisory committee meetings.
Mhm.
Absolutely appropriate. Any other questions?
seeing none. Okay, we'll ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting and mover and a seconder, Lucy, Councilor, all in favor? Carries. For the next meeting, we're going to have a date set for September 18th, to make sure we have quorum.
Yeah.
And if we do, then we'll go with that. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it.
All right, any acknowledgement?